The difference between editing, revising, and just plain skimming your work or a page that you've done for the day, either skimming it, praising it, or skimming it, unfortunately trashing it, being critical of it. So what are the difference between the three? Editing, revising, and skimming? Or are they all kind of the same in some sense?
Skimming is what I do when I don't know what I'm going to do. Then you're kind of, and okay, so editing, revising, skimming, interesting. I don't know how often I ever skim. A skim would be like a copy edit, or I literally kind of just, I don't even, I'm just tired and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to read this through and maybe, I can't remember, maybe it was Eric Roth. He's a screenwriter. Is he the one who did Benjamin Button? And what he talks about when he writes, he always starts at the beginning and reads through up to where, every day, he reads through up to where he's going to start writing and then writes from there. And of course, in the reading through, there's little things you want to change. So I'll do that. But for actual, and then there's editing, like copy editing, and I make tons of typos. So I definitely do that as well. And then I give it to other people to edit, and then I edit it again, and then it's still a mess. But revision, I try to approach it as a very specific process whereby I go into it with a plan. I'm like, okay, this is a scene, and the scene has these building blocks, and it's weak in a certain, like there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it needs some kind of adjustment. And so I try to look within that scene at kind of the polarity, like there's usually a little tiny character arc within the scene, right? Somebody, opens the door for their date, hopeful, and then they have a little conversation, and by the time they get to the car, they're feeling like this is going to be great, or by the time they get to the car, they're like, this is already a disaster. And those are two different things. And so a lot of times I think the revision process is you've kind of looked at the scene in terms of tracking what the character is going to go through throughout the entire script. Where does this scene fit into it? How is it setting up for other things? What does it need to do? So I look at it in terms of function and in terms of those building blocks. And so when I revise, I have I'm like, now it does this, and I want it to either do this better, or I want it to do something different. That's my ideal revision. You don't always get that luxury. Sometimes you're just like, this sucks, and somehow I've got to make it seem better, and then you're just fiddling. But revision in its ideal form, for me, is that.
Editing, skimming, and revision. I think to a certain extent, I agree with all of that. For me, when I'm writing something, I do tend to just write out, just completely, and then go back and read what I've written before I go to bed or before I give it up, and see if I can go a little, and then do the tweaking, and even to a certain extent see how much further I can go until I hit a wall. And then the next morning I go back and reread. Like I do a lot of self-editing, whether it be for small words or how can I say this better? How can it sound more real? How can it sound more authentic? Because I think as a journalist, I write differently than I speak. And so one of the challenges for me with dialogue has been listening to how people speak and the cadence to which people speak. And that's why going to cafes was important to me, because getting the rhythm of a particular speech pattern was important to me. I would listen to my friends actually screenwriting made me a better listener. Because I would listen to what people were saying and how they were saying it and what inflections they gave it. So when I edit, it's like, am I keeping that rhythm? Is that cadence still flowing? So I'm looking and editing for specific things, and then with the revision, like with what Barrington was saying, I'm looking at the overall and what can make the overall better. I guess the editing and skimming kind of go hand in hand for me. It's like I'm doing that all at one time, looking for different things. But I actually like the process of editing. I'm working as an editor now for Los Angeles Review of Books, and working on other people's work and looking at how to make their work better, because that was always one of the things that I loved about my editors, is that they kept the voice that I was looking for and my voice in the story, but they just made it that much better. And so that's what editing for me is. It's a way to make things better. Not always did editors make it better, but those that did, that was where I found, a strength, and keeping that voice and making sure the best of that voice came out. So what I hope when I'm editing is just honing in on those things that really make that voice sound authentic. And I think, to our credit, one of the things that people said was that each of the characters had their own distinct voice. And so that was really gratifying. And so now it's just the revising and making sure all that great voice, is in context with a great story and a strong sensibility and good conflict and deep, meaningful, great, deep, meaningful story. Yes, that was a word. Yeah. That was a word I couldn't seem to get out of my mouth.
And something that you said in there also made me think of kind of, I think my mind tends to jump to this kind of prose editing, but I think hearing her talk about voice, one other kind of editing that you'll do is you'll take a pass. So you'll do a dialogue pass, especially if we don't get to do as many passes as we'd like, because it seems like we're always writing to a deadline. But given the amount of time, like you'll do a dialogue pass, and then you'll do kind of a pass for geography and a pass for like certain characters. Like you'll do a pass where you're just kind of like tracking where one character is emotionally. Like do they have a logical progression of emotion between, if you know where the beginning is and you know where the end is, or is there some place in the middle where they're in a scene but they're getting kind of lost, and you can just put in a reaction that shows that something's changing in them, if they're reacting in a certain way to what's going on, so that it's something that you see on the screen more, right? So trying to think of, so you do your main character pass. Sometimes you'll do like a pass for secondary characters. So you'll do those kind of different passes, and I guess that would also fall under editorial.